Thank you very much, and thank you so much, Blossom, for that kind introduction. But more importantly, thank you for sharing your story. You are truly changing hearts and minds and literally making this world a better place for countless people. Please join me again in giving Blossom a round of applause. My friends, America looks far different today than when we were gathered here just a year ago. Our great nation has taken a monumental step forward, and today, each and every LGBT person from Savannah to Seattle, and yes, even Rowan County, Kentucky, can finally marry the person they love. We're inching closer and closer to what our founders set out to create, that more perfect union. And there are so many people in this room tonight who helped us get to the point where we will never, ever again have to say gay marriage or same-sex marriage. Now, it's just marriage. This victory didn't happen in a vacuum. It's a victory that wouldn't have been possible without courageous plaintiffs like Jim Obergefell, Edie Windsor, and so many others. This is a moment that has truly been decades in the making. Generations of fighters helped lay the groundwork for this victory, from Harvey Milk and Marsha P. Johnson to Tammy Baldwin and Barack Obama. It's also a moment that wouldn't have been possible without each and every one of you and the millions of LGBT people and our allies who fought day in and day out until we reached a point where being against marriage equality was something that people were afraid to admit. My, how those tables have turned, huh? But as momentous as this victory is, we also know that our work is far, far from over. Marriage is, after all, only one step, a giant step, on that long and winding road to full equality. I'm reminded tonight of a true champion for equality, a man who was a hero of mine and a dear friend to HRC. There are very few throughout human history who have embodied the ideals of honor, dignity, courage, and friendship quite like Julian Bond. You see, for me, growing up as a closeted kid in the Deep South, Julian's legacy as a civil rights leader, his pursuit of justice for all, and his pointed criticism of those who would permit discrimination in any form, helped to inspire me to fight for what's right. I was fortunate enough to come to know Julian and to work alongside him. And the man who became my friend was not only a legend, but he was one of the greatest champions our cause has ever known. We lost Julian a few months ago, and we're honored tonight to be joined by the woman who was truly his partner in the fight for equality, his wife, Pam Horowitz. Pam, thank you for being as steadfast a friend and ally to our cause as Julian was. All of us in this room and around this country owe you and Julian a debt of gratitude to what you've done to move equality forward. Thank you. He was not always a patient man. In fact, he was fond of saying, "Good things don't come to those who wait. They come to those who agitate." Those words ring as true today as ever before. Like each of us, Julian knew that we are all still in pursuit of that more perfect union. Discrimination, prejudice, and bigotry still tower over the lives of far, far too many people across this country. So in the spirit of Julian Bond, it's our job not to be patient, but it's our job to agitate and to organize and to fight like hell for full federal equality, nothing more and nothing less. Because as historic as it was, our marriage victory at the Supreme Court didn't end discrimination in this country. In fact, in most states today, a couple who gets married at 10 a.m. is at risk of being fired from their jobs by noon and evicted from their homes by 2, all in the same day, simply for posting those wedding photos on Facebook. Our civil rights laws in this country, they explicitly protect people on the basis of race, religion, sex, and national origin, but not gender identity and sexual orientation. This is 2015, folks. That's unacceptable. It's un-American. And that's why we've got to pass the Equality Act in Congress and elect a president who will sign it into law. You see, the Equality Act will finally ensure that LGBT Americans are protected under our long-standing civil rights laws, so that who you are and who you love can never be used against you in employment, in housing, in public places, and beyond. Now, make no mistake about it, passing the Equality Act won't be easy. Even though this bill already has the backing of the business community, many who are here in this room tonight, and it also has a bipartisan majority of the American public supporting it. But getting it passed will truly be the biggest legislative battle in the history of our movement, and we've had some big ones. And don't forget that on Inauguration Day 2017, the most pro-equality president in the history of this country will leave office. And someone with a far, far different view of how LGBT people should be treated could very well take his place. Not to mention that the Speaker of the House, that many of us would never dream of calling a moderate or even reasonable, just resigned because the extremist right wing of his party thought he wasn't rabid enough in his attacks against LGBT people and women and immigrants and African Americans and the environment. The list goes on. But the good news is that we all have a say in what happens next November. We can go to the polls and we can vote for the candidates who we know will help us achieve that more perfect union. But it's going to take a lot more than just this room voting on Election Day. We have to inspire and we have to energize every LGBT voter to not only show up and cast a vote, but also to go out and remind your friends and loved ones why our rights, our lives are worth voting for. Think about this. There are at least 10 million eligible LGBT voters in this country today. That's larger than the margin of victory of every presidential election since 1984. In 2012, President Obama won by just under 5 million votes, and LGBT people made up at least 6 million voters in that election. And in key battleground states like Florida and Ohio, the number of LGBT people of voting age is double our margins of victory. In other words, we literally have the power to decide elections. But as a movement, politically speaking, we still don't know our own strength. We haven't fully realized our own power. We can activate the LGBT vote. And in 2016, that's exactly what we're going to do. HRC is launching an unprecedented mobilization effort, opening offices and deploying thousands of volunteers and more than 100 field organizers to key battleground states. There, they will engage new members and supporters, register new voters, and make certain that those voters all across the country know exactly who will fight for full federal equality and who will stand in our way. There's a lot at stake here. Just look at some of the presidential candidates stumbling all over themselves to roll back the clock on our progress. Some have even flocked to have their photo taken with a bigoted Kentucky clerk who somehow thinks the Constitution doesn't apply to her. Bless her heart, as my Southern mom would say. But seriously, this is what we're up against. And that's why we need you, all of you in this room tonight. We need you to agitate, to mobilize and ensure Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee, or any of the other wackadoo extremists never occupy 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And at a time when Donald Trump is pushing to build an actual wall to keep people out of this country, we're working to tear down the walls of discrimination. The walls of discrimination that are still holding us back from achieving that more perfect union. Because if you ask me, the last thing this country needs is more walls or more division. America was founded on the notion that if we're willing to work hard, nothing can keep us from succeeding. Not just surviving, but succeeding. But that's not always the case, is it? Far too often we hear of good, honest, hardworking people, folks like Blossom Brown, who come up against roadblocks that exist because of prejudice, bigotry, and discrimination. Roadblocks that exist in small towns, big cities, and in schools, hospitals, and workplaces all across this country. We cannot and we will not sit idly by when there are still places on this earth and in this country where being LGBT makes you a target for discrimination and even violence, where HIV continues to ravage our community, and where accessing basic needs can be a monumental challenge. And that's why HRC is investing more than ever before to break down those barriers and to reach people in the communities that need this work the most. From Project One America, focused on bringing true equality to the Deep South, to working with our allies around the world to advance equality through HRC Global. We've got our work cut out for us. And that's why we need you. We can't do this without each and every one of you and our grassroots army of nearly 2 million members and supporters all across this country. Because after all, we are only as strong as the collective voices through which we speak. When we speak up as a neighbor, a family member, a bishop, even the Secretary of the Army, when people hear from one of the greatest Olympians in history, or the CEO of one of the world's largest companies, we chip away. We chip away at ending that hopelessness and that despair that so many of us remember feeling in the classroom, in the church pew, or even around our own dinner tables. That is the fight. That's the fight that we must undertake with greater vigor and determination than ever before. For that transgender woman in Baltimore seeing her friends murdered in the streets. For that lesbian couple raising 2 kids in Mississippi. And for that teen living with HIV on the streets of this very city, our nation's capital. They can't wait. We can't wait. And with your continued support and leadership, I promise you we won't wait. We won't stop fighting and we won't stop agitating until those ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are finally realized, and until full equality reaches every person in every corner of this vast country, and until finally we achieve that more perfect union. Thank you very much. Thank you.